Well, I absolutely love being a twin. I think it's the biggest gift that I have in my life is the fact that I have a twin. And when people often say, "What's it like being a twin?" and I always wonder, well, what's it like not being a twin?
Welcome. This is Uncommon Sense, a CPA podcast presented by the Métis CPA Knowledge Centre. The Centre is an initiative of the CPA Education Foundation, the charitable arm of the Chartered Professional Accountant profession in Alberta. For the record, this podcast isn't about bean counting. Our episodes feature conversations with Alberta CPAs sharing their insights on a wide range of timely topics. I'm Gordon Turtle, your host for this episode, and our guest today is CPA, community leader, corporate director, consultant, and identical twin, Maureen Moneta, CPA CA. Maureen is also an Indigenous Albertan with strong roots in Alberta's Métis community and in Indigenous initiatives across the province. Maureen serves or has served on several boards, including the Alberta Gaming, Liquor and Cannabis Board, the CPA Alberta Board, the Edmonton Unlimited Board, and the Alberta Indigenous Opportunities Corporation, as well as a private company board. She has been named a Top 40 Albertan Under 40 by Edify Edmonton magazine and earned an Early Achievement Award from CPA Alberta. Maureen is here today to talk about her journey to personal and career success, her views on women and leadership, and some of the work she's been involved in to support Indigenous education and businesses in the province. Thanks for joining us, Maureen. We have so much to talk about today. Let's begin with your story, Maureen. When I read your online bio, it quickly became apparent that you've built a pretty amazing career that's at least partly focused on helping others and growing communities. What was your journey like to get where you are today?
Well, thanks, Gordon. It's a pleasure to be here. I would say I think my career has been really consistently focused on helping others and growing communities. I'm passionate about advancing inclusion for all people and believe strongly that diverse groups with inclusive cultures make the best decisions, and the results really reflect that. I strive to help businesses and communities just be the best that they can be. And so what was my journey like to get to where I am today? I was born and raised in a small community, Elk Point, Alberta, in northeastern area of the province. I started my post-secondary journey in Camrose at the Augustana faculty of the U of A, and then later finished at the University of Alberta in Edmonton. I articled for my CPA designation which was the legacy body CA with Kingston Ross Pasnick in Edmonton. I really wanted to choose sort of a mid-sized local firm because of my rural upbringing, and Edmonton still felt very, very big at that time, and I thought it was important to work for a firm where I could get to know everyone and have that close community. Once I got my designation, I moved into industry fairly quickly and have held different roles within mostly the charitable and sort of organizations that focused on community, whether it was Habitat for Humanity, the University Hospital Foundation, Rupert's Land Institute, before going out onto my own and doing corporate governance and consulting.
So is that a conscious decision to work primarily with charitable groups, or is it that just the way things happened?
I would say it was conscious, but perhaps maybe the reason has evolved. And so I knew that everything I did needed to have a bigger purpose and contribute in a way that I was helping advance communities. Earlier on in my career, I don't think I would have necessarily articulated it that way, but that was absolutely kind of the through line. It had to be about more than just the work. I wanted to feel passionate that I was making a difference and having an impact. And I felt that I was able to do that within the charitable sector quite easily. As my career has moved along, I can see now that there's actually incredible impact I can have in many different sectors with different organizations and in different ways. And it doesn't have to necessarily be in the charitable sector to have that kind of impact I strive for.
Right. So you've got a lot of confidence, Maureen. I've noticed that about you, from the first time I met you a couple of years ago. So where does that confidence come from for you? And were there people in your life who gave you important encouragement and support when you needed it the most?
I smile when you say that, Gordon, because my confidence is something that I'm always working to improve. I would actually not necessarily characterize myself with having high confidence, but perhaps higher self-awareness to know that it's something I need to keep developing. I think I know that there's really important work to do, And I haven't shied away from sort of rolling my sleeves up and getting to work. I believe that comes from the values that my family's instilled in me. My parents were very hard workers, both entrepreneurs, and they made things happen. My dad was the owner-operator of a gravel truck company, and my mom retired as a nurse and then purchased and has run a bed and breakfast business for the last 10 years on the lakeshore of Cold Lake, right into her 70s. And having parents that have had long, fulfilling, important careers and really emphasizing that work ethic to get there, I think is a big part. The second piece is the value of education. I can remember very, very young, my mom saying, education is the way we break the cycles and the way we move forward. And so my siblings and I quite literally didn't have a choice. We were going to post-secondary and on to professional programs before that. And I think about, what that must have meant for my family. My dad had to leave school after having only a grade 5 education to help support his family and contribute in that way. And, having children with myself with a CPA, my twin sister's a lawyer, and my brother's an engineer. And all three of us have really found ways that we can contribute and provide for our families through the education that we've been so fortunate to get.
You speak about how close your family were and all the kind of good advice and example that your parents provided for you. Brian Heshey, the founder of this podcast, would often speak about people from smaller communities, young people who had to leave home in order to go to college and university and leave that setting. I assume you needed to do that as well when you went from Elk Point to Camrose. What was that like, leaving that strong, stable environment and going out on your own at, probably you were 18 or something like that?
Yes, very young 18, I would say. For us growing up in rural Alberta, Elk Point had about 1,000 people. So there's about 30 kids that we sort of went through school with and had about 9 in our stream of classes. And you knew as a young person that the decision you were about to make on what you did after high school was so phenomenal and important, because you would either stay in the community, and that would mean you probably always would, or you would go out to get any kind of training, whether it was through trades or through post-secondary or anything else. You needed to leave the community to get any kind of skills development, really. And that was huge for people, depending on where they were at. And so I think because my parents had, with us, insisted, quite literally did not have an option of anything else, the question of what we were going to do was never there. You knew and you were preparing to leave at 17, 18 years old, essentially your whole life. I remember my mom saying, you will go to Camrose, you'll go right after high school, and I'm very generously allowing you to choose what you'd like to take. But that's what you're going to do. And thinking back now, what a phenomenal gift she gave me in really insisting that this was the way I would open doors and opportunities in my life, because she was absolutely right.
Yeah. Wow. So what were your personal priorities as you mapped out your career path, maybe even from the time you started at Augustana and ended up in the CPA career path? What were your priorities, and did any of those priorities change as your career evolved?
Yes, I'd say as a young professional, I thought a lot about becoming an expert. I got really excited about thinking about digging deep into a field and truly understanding and appreciating, what that would mean to be almost sort of that last on the line, that you were trusted with that kind of knowledge. And so when I decided that I wanted to go into accounting, and I sort of changed my mind quite a few times earlier on, but that idea that if I could understand the language of business and really, really get the fundamentals of a business's finances, what that would mean for me. Every industry, every organization needed an accountant. It felt like a clear title, which at the time seemed important to me. Mm-hmm. And it also felt like job security to know that you could move and work in different industries. In Elk Point, we didn't have a lot of diversity of industries. And so often as the economy would change, you saw a lot of families really be impacted by that in the work that they did. And so I think I've been fortunate that I've consistently worked for organizations where I've been aligned with their purpose. I've had roles that I found a lot of value in and found ways that I could use my skills as a CPA in different ways. Really, when I think about what priorities have changed, everything changed for me when I had my own family and thinking about what mattered. I decided that I didn't want to sacrifice the level that I was going to work at, but certainly needed to find a way that I could put my family first, always. And there was a few years ago where my daughter, who was 4 at the time, said to me, when I grow up and thinking about what I'm going to do, I don't want to work because I'll miss everything like you.
Oh, wow.
And that was one of these like moments that you never forget, where I really reconsidered those priorities and some of those things. I thought I was role modeling women in business and women in leadership in a way, but was sacrificing a lot in order to do that. And that's not to say that would be something that everyone would go through, but with where I was at with my life and how my family looked, it was critically important that I made some shifts and looked at different things. And so with my family now, the balance is the biggest priority, how to contribute to the business community in ways that I can, but making sure that my family stays front and center in everything that I do.
Are you going to be like your mom and allow your children to pick what they want to do when they go to university?
Well, the kids are very excited to hear this podcast, so I should probably say yes. I think the world is changing so fast. You know, some of the things that I thought were important, and even some of the career ideas that I had as a young person based on what my family prioritized and saw as opportunities, I think is so different now. Even growing up in an urban center, there's very different kinds of careers that when I was a young person, it was, do you want to be a teacher? Do you want to be a nurse? Right. You could work the front desk at an oil field service company and maybe at the grocery store, and that was about it. And so I'm amazed every day when I think about all of these really interesting, cool, fun, unique, different kinds of careers that young people can have that look really different. They don't have to be, as traditional as what I thought that they would be back then.
Yeah. Well, that kind of all leads into my next question. It's no secret that women, including Indigenous women, can face unique obstacles as they build their careers. What was your experience in coping with and responding to sexism or racism as your career developed? And how do you handle that type of discrimination now?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the more aware I've become of microaggressions and discrimination, the more I see them in the workplace. And I think that's unfortunate, and it's also fortunate. I think it's unfortunate because it's still happening, and it's still happening a lot. But I think it's fortunate because now I feel that I have the skills to understand the dynamics that I'm seeing in a different way, and then I can help contribute to that change that I think we need still as a community. And so sometimes in my personal experience, the discrimination has been more direct. I was once told by a leader that I shouldn't forget where I came from, and regardless of what I knew, I would never fit into the business community in Edmonton, just because of who my family was and because of how my upbringing was. Other times it's been more unexpected or smaller microaggressions maybe that are, you leave a conversation thinking like, well, that kind of stung. Why was that? What just happened there? And I feel sometimes still a little confused, wondering if what I think I'm seeing. But absolutely women, and even more so women from underserved communities, they face, I think, additional obstacles. And so where I think the opportunity is we can give others the gift of allowing them to see how they're contributing to that conversation and to moving discrimination forward and moving away from discrimination. And by that, I mean, I don't think we need to be calling people out, but we hear now more and more about calling people in, inviting them to reconsider, inviting them to become more aware of the impact that they're having on others and the impact they're having on society and whether that impact is positive or not. And so I've done some work in diversity, equity, and inclusion and really looking at what those microaggressions mean and how impactful our small comments can have on others and what we can do to all continue learning and unlearning in that way.
That's a really interesting phrase. Instead of calling people out, you call them in. I really like that. I hadn't heard that before. That's really cool. So what does the future hold for you, Maureen, career-wise? Do you have goals that are yet to be achieved?
Always.
You're pretty young, so I'm sure you do.
I think that with that aspiration for excellence, in some ways, I would consider myself sort of never fully satisfied. I think there's so much out there. There's such exciting work to be done, and I've been fortunate to be a part of really important, really exciting, meaningful work. And at the same time, I believe wholeheartedly that we each have one precious life to live. And I recognize how cheesy that sounds, but with everything that I do, I want to contribute to making the world a better place for next generations. And I don't just mean my kids, I mean their kids and their kids. I think that's where our legacy can be, is how we're contributing to creating that better long-term future. So I'm really excited about the great work that I've been fortunate to be a part of, helping build high-performing boards right across Canada. My ability to contribute in the boardroom has been something that I hold very dear. I'm hopeful to continue to be able to continue making a positive impact with both Indigenous communities and the business community, and how we can sort of close some of the divides. It's really important work to advance reconciliation in a sincere and authentic way. And in that regard, I'm really proud of the work that CPA is doing and the initiatives that are undertaken there. So,
well, great. We'll be coming back to some of that in a little bit, but I want to turn now to your experiences and insights into the concept of leadership. You currently serve as Vice Chair of CPA Alberta, the regulatory organization for Alberta's more than 30,000 chartered professional accountants. And you're next in line to be a chair of that organization in the near future. Those are both pretty important roles, but they are only some of the many leadership positions you have held or continue to hold. And those are all roles outside of your full-time job as a business and leadership consultant. Where do you find the energy to be so active?
Well, I love being involved in a variety of things and sort of balancing my time within. And I think that started really early on in my career, where I realized I was applying or interested in opportunities that I was being told I didn't have enough experience for. And so I thought, well, I was a young 20-something person and I only have so many sort of years on this earth. How could I get more experience in the same amount of time maybe as some of my colleagues to get that edge? And that's why I joined my first board in my early 20s. And have continued in that work because I felt I could actually gain more experience doing multiple roles in different ways. And so, curious to me that you referenced my job as a full-time consultant. I think my full-time job is a mom. That's how I see myself and my role. The kids and the family, that's first and foremost. The impacts we have at home, I think, translate into the impacts that we have in community. After that, I think about my time on the 5 boards that I serve. I have committee chair positions on all of those boards now. It is a fair undertaking and work that I'm really committed to giving my all to. I have my community work. I do some work with the Institute of Corporate Directors on their executive chapter and some other things that I'm passionate about. And with the extra time that's left, I do some work as a consultant and as an advisor. In comparison to others that might work in that space, I'd say I'm quite selective about the work that I do.
Oh, okay.
It has to be sort of the right work for the right reasons, where I feel like I can have sort of maximum impact. I'd be the first person to refer opportunities to someone else if I felt that there was someone else that may be able to be a fit. And so balancing all of those things, I wonder, sounds like quite a few different things. How does that all work? And it comes back to those core values. I keep the autonomy of my own time as first and foremost. And then I live by the values of connection, excellence, and harmony. For me, those are at the root of everything that I do. And as long as I remain values aligned and I can protect my schedule, work doesn't feel like work. It actually feels really fun and really contributing in a really great way.
What are those 3 values again? Can you say that again?
For me, I believe, and who knows? They continue to iterate as I grow up. But I believe they're connection, excellence, and harmony, and those are the 3 values that have sort of kept me rooted in who I am and what's important. And I can tell now almost instantly if I'm misaligned with those. I can actually feel it.
Yeah, those are three terms that really apply a lot to values and leadership as I think about them. I once took a leadership workshop, and the person leading it said, there are two keys to being an effective leader: wisdom and character. Wisdom is something a person is born with, while character is something that one develops over the course of their life. What do you think of that take on leadership, and what have been the keys to leadership success for you?
I love that take. That really resonates. As I've been working towards thinking about how do I define myself in a few words or less, because part of the challenge that comes with having a bit of an unconventional path is then when people ask who you work for or what you do, it's not so simple to answer that simple question. And so where I've landed is that I think I lead with grit, care, and integrity. And that's part of my leadership. And so I love what you've shared around character and wisdom, but I wonder if there's a piece that could be added around adaptability or resilience, or how I think of grit, because I believe that we'll all face adversity, whether it's external forces or probably even more so now internal forces with mental health and other things. And how do we find a way through that tough stuff, I think is almost as important as who we are. And so how I've been able to do that, I believe, is through having, authentic connections with people, through allowing people to see who I am and what I stand for, and really staying true to that. And, I connected back to early in my career, I felt that I was really worried as a young person that I was new to Edmonton. I didn't have family here. I didn't have connections here. I kept thinking to myself, who's going to advocate for me? Who's going to put my name forward? It seemed that at that time in the business community that I was in, that people were getting opportunities because of who they knew. And it resonated very much when I started reframing that for myself and thinking about how I could pass on opportunities to others that maybe weren't going to inherently get them like me. And so I've made that a huge focus, is making sure if there's someone else that I can give an opportunity to for something that I've been afforded, then I will pass it along wholeheartedly every time, and try to bring other people in that maybe are from those underrepresented communities, or folks that maybe wouldn't have the same connections that I felt fairly lost with at the beginning.
Yeah, you've touched on some important additional elements of leadership there: resilience, authenticity, and I don't know what you'd call that last point, is maybe compassion or caring. Those are really important, so thanks for that. Are there lessons or experiences you've gleaned from Métis culture that help to define your approach to leadership roles?
I think the value of community and relationships, probably the hard work as well. Métis people, we say we're the people that own ourselves. And so when I think about why it's so important to me to maintain that autonomy of my schedule and of my time and really of my decision-making and what I do, I think that it's rooted in that culture piece, and that's where it comes from. It's curious to me because as a Métis person in Alberta, I had one certain experience. I wasn't raised on a Métis settlement. My family came from the Fishing Lake Métis settlement, but I was raised and grew up in Elk Point, Alberta. And my experience would be very different than a Métis person who grew up on a Métis settlement, or someone who grew up in a different urban setting or otherwise. And so sometimes when we think about Métis culture, what it means, I think it's important to sort of have that caveat to say, this is what it means to me in my own experience as an individual who's Métis. And it might mean something entirely different to someone else, depending on how the culture has been taught to them and how they continue to practice the culture in their own ways.
Interesting. Have you encountered resistance to or skepticism about your leadership abilities because you're a woman, or because you're Indigenous, or both? If so, how did that make you feel, and how did you overcome it?
So yes, and yes. Interestingly, Gordon, I was recently told by someone who was certainly not trying to be negative. They were being really candid with me, and they said, you don't not fit in because you're a woman or because you're Indigenous. It's actually because you're very young for a board director. And so I think, skepticism around my leadership, absolutely. And it's been for different reasons and in different ways. What I probably face more of lately is that the age discrimination piece. The average age of a board member in Canada is 62 years old.
Wow.
I'm 38. And so to have a millennial-aged board member is unique. There's few of us that are at that stage of life and yet have the experience. And really, it's just because I started my board experience so young. I've almost 15 years on boards, and I've served on 8 boards over my career. And so, really proud that I have the experience and perspective to contribute, but it is unique. And so I think about that and what it's meant for me and the skepticism that I've faced. And I wanted to share something about someone that I admire. I really admire a First Nations CPA named Robert Andrews. He's been at the forefront of making incredible systemic change. And I shared with Robert early on when I had met him that I was struggling with being offered different opportunities and feeling like it was because I was Indigenous and people were looking to, essentially tokenism. They were looking to check a box saying they had an Indigenous person on their board. I was a CPA, I was Indigenous, I was young, I was a female, I was from a rural Alberta. I was checking all of these boxes. I said to Robert, I'm really struggling. And then I feel like I'm sitting there looking around feeling really excluded because it wasn't really my voice that was wanted. I was wanted for the wrong reasons. And Robert said to me, get to the table and then change their minds. There's more change you can make from the inside than the outside. And I think about that all the time. When I'm in different spaces and I feel excluded or things get hard, I think about what Robert said and how true that is, that every opportunity with every chance for connection, I can change someone's mind.
Man, that's excellent advice. I do know Robert, and I can, I've learned a lot from him in my discussions with him over the years. So it's great to hear that he's been of some, lent you some wisdom as well. Well, I've got some breaking news. We're going to have to end this episode here, Maureen. Thank you so much for your time today. Thankfully, Maureen has agreed to join us for part 2 of this engaging and eye-opening conversation. So listeners, be sure to look for part 2 as Maureen continues to share her unique insights into leadership and career success. So Maureen, thank you for being our guest today.
Thank you.
The Uncommon Sense podcast is presented by the CPA Education Foundation and funded by the Métis CPA Knowledge Center. The Knowledge Center was created through a generous donation to the CPA Education Foundation by the late Brian Heshie. Brian was a distinguished Albertan, business leader, CPA, educator, and community builder. His generosity and commitment to education underpinned his good works across Alberta throughout his lifetime. We would like to acknowledge that the CPA Education Foundation offices are situated on the traditional Treaty 6 and Treaty 7 territories and Métis Nation homeland. The Foundation acknowledges that we reside on traditional and ancestral territories of many Indigenous, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Their histories and culture influence our community to this day. The CPA Education Foundation is committed to helping build a province where Indigenous people and their voices and experiences are heard, valued, respected, and celebrated. Technical and recording services for this podcast provided by Wolf Willow Studios in Edmonton. If you enjoyed this podcast, please be sure to like, subscribe, and tell your friends about us. If you have any comments on the podcast, write to us at cpaef@cpaalberta.ca. To learn more about the CPA Education Foundation and the Métis CPA Knowledge Center, visit cpaalberta.ca/foundation. Thanks for listening.